Okay? So I put them both on the graph at the same time. The most important thing to remember here is this point right here. The marginal cost will always go through the lowest point on the average cost. Let me say that again. The marginal cost will always go through the very bottom of the average cost. Why? The average cost is always moving toward the marginal cost. So when the average cost is high and the marginal cost is below it, the average cost is going to go down. So all this space in here where the average is above the marginal, the average will be falling. From here, now that the marginal is above the average, it's going to pull the average up. Remember our guys, right? Each guy, the marginal changes, and then the average changes, but the average changes less quickly. So the marginal is always above the when the marginal is above the average always has to be going up. When the marginal is below the average always has to be going down. And so the marginal will always go through the bottom point. If the marginal is above the average going up. If the marginal is below the average is going down. Exciting. If you're really into math, there's math stuff about this, which is a good thing. If you like math, you can take econ courses where we'll go through the math here, and then it's fun. So we put all these stupid lines on the same graph at the same time. So there's the marginal. The average variable and the average total look the same, but the variable obviously has to be below the average, right? What's the difference between the average total cost and the average variable cost? Well, that is that. The average fixed cost is the difference between the total and the variable. So you notice the average fixed cost here is pretty high, and the difference between these things is large. Now down here, the average fixed cost is getting low, and these two lines are getting close together. Okay? Again, the marginal cost is going to go through the bottom of the average variable cost and the average total cost. And we get these beautiful, messy graphs with too many lines on them. Okay? Exciting. All right. The short run. Let's go through this again. The graphs we just looked at, the whole analysis we just looked at, is for what we call the short run. The short run means we have fixed inputs and fixed costs. So there's fixed and variable, right? In the short run, I have to pay my rent. In the short run, I have to pay my utility bills, right? There are certain costs that no matter what, I'm going to pay the same amount. My phone bill does not go up, right? Whether people call me at the store or not. Okay? That's the short run. So if there's things that are fixed, I'm in the short run. If my inputs and costs are all variable, then I'm in the long run. Now, don't think that means that you sit around in the short run and then someday you're going to wake up and you're in the long run and you're in the long run forever. That never happens. You're actually only very rarely in the long run. Imagine that you signed a 1-year lease for your space and that lease is about to expire. While you're deciding what to do with that, you're in the long run. So you're sitting around thinking, okay, I made good money last year. I should stay in business. Do I want to keep this space that I've got? Yes or no? While you're making that decision, you're in the long run because now you've turned your fixed rent into a variable and you can adjust it. So maybe you need a bigger space. Maybe you have a different location. Maybe right? There's all kinds of things you could do. And while you're at that point that you can consider all these other things you can do, you're in the long run. If you decide you're going to move into a bigger space, as soon as you sign the lease for that bigger space, you're back in the short run because now you're committed to that space for the term of that lease. Okay? So we're only in this long run, and it's true in life too, right? That most of the time you're committed, you're stuck, you're in your job, whatever. But when you're looking around and you're thinking about, hey, what am I going to do? Now you're in the long run and you're thinking about the future and you have all these choices. But as soon as you decide what you're going to do, then you're back in the short run and some things in your life are fixed. All right, the long run. So there's two things about the long run. One we just talked about, which is flexibility. You can change the way you do business. Long time ago, I worked at Burger King. A typical day on our crew, there were 13 people who ran the Burger King. Why? Well, for one thing, we made drinks for people. When you ordered your beverage, we made your beverage. Even if you were in the store, we made your beverage. We didn't have a drive-thru, so everybody had to come into our restaurant. We made their drinks for them. When they wanted a refill, they came to us, and we made the refill for them. Okay? If, instead now, we put a beverage station out in the lobby, now those people can come in, they can make their own beverage. The two people who sat there through the whole lunch rush and made beverages for people, we don't need them anymore. Okay? We change the way the counter works. We change the way the orders get to the workers. We change the way we put things together so that we need fewer people to do each task. And over time, fewer people on a shift on a Burger King than there used to be. Okay? Flexibility. We can put new technology in. We can change our space around. We can do all kinds of things in that brief moments of the long run and change the way we do business. Okay? The long run also makes possible something called replication. And this is one of the key things to remember about businesses. And in some ways, it has a lot to say about how people think and why some people are successful and some aren't. When a fast food restaurant wants to expand, they don't make every restaurant bigger. They build new restaurants. Why? Well, when I put in more restaurants, I'm adding land and labor and capital and all that stuff all at the same time. That's how I keep my costs down. Plus, it gets me into more locations. It's better for my customers. But it's better to replicate, which means I'm increasing my land, my labor, my capital. I'm getting out of fixed, and all of a sudden when I'm replicating, everything's variable again. When I'm building a new restaurant, it's variable. I can do different things in that restaurant. So the fact that I keep building new restaurants, replicating we call it, it gives me chances to be more efficient than if I tried to make what I have produce more. So instead of trying to make each restaurant produce more stuff, I create more restaurants. Starbucks will even put in restaurants on opposite sides of the street rather than make a bigger one on one side of the street. Right? Replication. Reproducing what you have. Lots of small restaurants is going to be more efficient than trying to make one giant one. Do we agree? Replication. Okay. So the economist word for size is scale. Scale is our word for size. So we scale up means we make it bigger. Scale down means we make it smaller. It's all about the size. We have returns to scale. Scale means size. I already said that. We have what's called economies of scale. There are advantages to being big. Let's compare UNLV with Nevada State College. Both schools have one president, but UNLV has 30,000 students and NSC has 10,000 students. Really, probably not that many, but let's just say 10,000 students, just for fun. Our presidents cost $300,000 a year. So if that president costs $300,000 a year, divided by 30,000 students, that means each student at UNLV pays $10 for the president's salary. At NSC, you have 10,000 students, and you have this $300,000. So it's $30 per student. When NSC first started and they had 1,000 students, it was $300 per student for a president. The administration, you have all this administration on both campuses, but on the bigger campus, that administrative cost is spread out among a lot more students. So it can be more efficient because there are certain costs that are just the same for every school, and the bigger you are, the more you can spread those out. Okay? There's people who believe that we're about to see a huge change in higher education because of the coronavirus, that big schools are going to use their scale economies, the fact that they're big, to spread out, and we'll see them offering their online courses not just to their students but all over the place. And that will wipe out the small schools in a lot of states. There's states that have 30 and 40 places you can go to college. Okay? There's states that have way more than that. California has hundreds of places. Well, maybe a whole bunch of those get wiped out because you can go to these big schools cheaper and they wipe out the little schools. Okay? So going to be interesting to see if we're in this mode where we offer a whole lot more stuff online, whether the little schools in the world can survive it. We shall see. Sometimes we have what's called constant returns to scale. That means it doesn't change as you get bigger, right? And replication is a way to get constant returns to scale. Every restaurant has the same cost, but I can keep adding more restaurants. So even though my whole company is getting bigger, each restaurant is the same. And so my costs in my restaurant stay the same and my costs of production stay the same. So I have constant returns to scale. By splitting my business up into all these little pieces, I get constant returns to scale. Every time I want to expand my business, I add another little piece. It has the same cost as all the other pieces. That's constant returns to scale. Then there are what's called diseconomies of scale. In a big business, the managers have to look over lots and lots and lots of employees. And it's very difficult for them to do that. So as businesses get bigger, there's more chance that some of the workers are goofing off, what we call shirking, or that things are going on in the business that management doesn't know about, right? We had 2 employees at UNLV a long time ago that had basically the same job, and pretty much only one of them would come to work every day. And it was tough for their boss to figure it out. They got away with that for years before their boss figured out that only one of them was ever, except for when they had big meetings or something, only one of them was at work every day because they did the same thing. So it wasn't that stuff wasn't getting done. In fact, all the work got done, which meant that when the boss fired the 2 of them, they only had to hire one person to replace them because there was really a one-person job at these. Okay? So as we get bigger, we get more impersonal. We can't monitor things as well. There are management difficulties in size. There's other things. And so when your business is growing, you should have economies of scale. As it grows, you should have advantages caused by you're getting bigger. Then at some point, you should be able to replicate and do all these other things and have constant returns to scale and keep your costs kind of the same. But then at some point, your business gets too big and you start having diseconomies of scale at the same time. Good. We also have something called the minimum efficient scale. That's the smallest your business can be and operate efficiently. For a restaurant, that's really small. For a car company, that's a couple 100,000 cars a year at least. Okay? So depends on what business you're in, how big this minimum efficient scale. Some it's small, some businesses it's a giant. Okay? And strangely enough, we can draw a graph of this. So imagine that U-shaped cost curve spread out, And really what this cost curve is, and you can look at it in the book, though these graphs are always so messy, I don't like them. Remember what you have. McDonald's isn't going to build a bigger and bigger and bigger restaurant. They're going to build lots of small restaurants. So they're going to keep their costs the same by building the same size restaurants over and over and over again. Okay? So your costs come down. That's economies of scale. Area A, that part of the line by the A, is economies of scale. My costs per unit are going down. At some point, I start being able to replicate and do all these other things, and my costs stay the same for a while, and I have what's called constant returns. That's B. And then I get diseconomies of scale as my business gets too big and I head up in area C. Again, this is a long run thing, because in the long run I can add businesses, in the short run, if I just keep adding workers, I don't get any advantage from that. It's always a negative. In the long run, I should be able to add resources, up to some point at least, add resources and get constant returns to scale. That point that I labeled 1, that blue dot that I labeled 1, that's the minimum efficient scale. If your business is on the part called A, its costs are going to be higher than your competitors who are on B, and you're not going to survive. You have to get onto the B part for your business to survive. It has to be at least that big. Otherwise, its costs will be too high and your business will not survive. Got it?